Hi, Peggy.
Hi.
Hey, welcome to the Far From Boring Pod. How are you?
Yeah, so excited. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm super, super grateful that you made time to come on because obviously we've connected before, but I felt like even though we're on different continents, different side of the world, there's a lot of synergy, shared values, and I'm a big fan. So thank
Oh,
you. Thank
thank
you.
you. I appreciate
So
that.
maybe do you want to start by giving us an overview as to who is Peggy Bell?
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. Peggy Bell is a multifaceted person who is constantly changing. So I've been in the mining natural resources sector because I also supported environmental projects for about 15 years. Not always with a mining lens, but predominantly with a mining lens. So I also supported massive environmental rehabilitation projects from a client perspective. So I was a client account manager, sales director with a multinational consulting firm for a couple of years, and then I also spent 10 years with multinational laboratory where I was spent 5 years on the global team, and I did everything related to growth. And before that, I spent 10 years in hotel resort management, which people find kind of funny. I got into mining through personal divorce and all this other stuff. But the hotel management piece is always very instrumental in my mining career
Okay.
because it taught me to focus on really big problems in really high pressure situations, especially when it came to clients. So, I joke that you've never known a high pressure situation until somebody's toilet is backing up and you have a team of hockey moms yelling at you. And so you need to fix that
Oh,
quickly.
hockey
So,
mums. That's something we
yeah.
don't have in the UK. We've
Oh,
got
hey,
hockey
yeah.
mums. I feel like hockey mums are a different breed.
Oh, you have no idea. And they have colorful language and they are not afraid to use it. So,
Great learning curve.
yeah.
Brilliant. Dealing with all walks of life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. I think I was particularly drawn to you. Like there was many identities that made up your beautiful tapestry. And one that really resonated with me that I was so drawn to was the fact that you are a storyteller.
I
And
am.
I think the reason being is that one of my favorite books that I've read this year is Carmine Gallo's Storyteller's Secret. I don't know
Ooh, I
whether
have not
you've
read
read it.
that. No.
So good. Like so many takeaways. I don't know where to begin, but I guess the majority of the most inspirational, successful entrepreneurs and leaders, they massively advocate or practice the art of storytelling. You know, Steve Jobs, who I know you've quoted
Oh,
in
yeah. Yeah.
your TED Talks, or
Yeah.
Winston Churchill, or Richard Branson. And I guess it goes back to the fact that we're hardwired to listen to stories, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
back to our ancestors telling stories around the campfire as a forms of connection, but also survival, right?
Mm-hmm.
To share their insights, their knowledge, and building communities. So I guess I'm really curious, when did you first realize that you were a storyteller?
Oh, that's such a good question because I've been talking about this lately, not so much publicly, but within personal circles. And I think that there are themes throughout everybody's life that when you get to be a certain vintage, you look back on it and you say, oh, well, that makes more sense now, right? So, for example, I always loved creative writing classes, always. And I won a communications award for a poem that I wrote in grade 8. And I took history was kind of my subject matter of most interest throughout still today, and that is one big long story, right? And so it is quite literally a story that starts whenever recorded history begins, and it goes all the way through, and you can track the problems of today back millennia. And so that to me is so fascinating, is that history is just a sequence of events. And the other part of history that I always find so interesting that we're starting to discover more of now in a digital age is while history is always written by the victors, is that who weren't the victors and what were their stories behind how they saw life, right? So because they say like there's two sides to every story, or three, because there's the truth. And so how can we learn from those stories that aren't written down, but we're starting to discover in other ways, whether that's through oral retelling or other pieces. And so when it comes to, my passion is really helping women entrepreneurs to tell their story and to build their industry authority so that they can really own their lane. And there's always a story behind that. Like, why did you get into entrepreneurship? What did you experience? How are you helping your clients today? How are you different from anybody else? And there's so much color and tapestry, as you say, behind that. And that's what really connects people. Even if you're in some sort of transactional business, people buy from people.
They do.
So, yeah.
They do. I've actually got goosebumps listening to you say that. So powerful. And I guess, my question is, do you think storytellers are like born, or are they made? And if they're made, how can you hone your skills to become a successful storyteller, do you think?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think they can be made. So I'm reading right now Rick Rubin's The Creative Act, I want to say. And so it's all about how even if you don't identify as being creative, we all have creativity in us that we can foster in some sort of way. And so I don't think that storytelling is necessarily, you sit down and write a story. You can tell a story with really anything, food, like a project, development in mining. That's a whole story in and of itself, right?
Isn't it?
So I think that, it's a practice for sure, 100%. And so you do need to practice your storytelling and understand how to continually engage people, especially if we're looking at micro storytelling now, which is like, LinkedIn captions or... So you really need to, get that hook, middle, and then the end, the call to action, whatever that might be. And it's not necessarily sales related, but so how do you do that in less than 50 words?
Right, because in a world where, our attention is diminishing, you have to capture those people, that attention super quickly. And you talk about micro stories, which is such an interesting concept, which can be used in a social media setting, but also, I guess, in the workplace as well, especially as we're in a much fast-paced world where you have to engage, capture the attention and that trust quickly. And I imagine, obviously you have been on TED, you're a TED talker, and I imagine quite a lot of practice, research, thought went behind the architecture of your talk.
Yes.
So, which is amazing. And I guess, what advice would you give people listening today as to how you would, hone those skills to be a storyteller and capture your audience?
Oh, wow. So I think that there is a good TED Talk. I wish I knew what it was right off the top of my head. And it talks about almost, what she talks about is studying the cadence and rhythm of the great storytellers of the world. And so in this TED Talk, she actually speaks about Martin Luther King Jr. and how he doesn't it's not a steady upstream towards the climax where then have the resolve. It's very much almost like a stepped or trough event where you go up and you kind of stagnate, and then you go down, and then you go back up again, and you keep on going through these troughs. And so storytelling is really about whether it is a hook, which is really what we use in social media to get somebody to read the rest of the caption, or if it's an impact statement, which would be there's a catalyst, an event, and a response. You kind of have to keep on using that impact statement throughout the story. You can't just build it and leave it flat. But the great storytellers always keep on hooking you back in. And so that's what I'm currently practicing, is that realizing that my own stories need to keep on kind of hooking people back in and keep it personal to them.
Keeping it personal and connecting through emotion. Because what I loved about your TED Talks was that it was a perfect blend of having the data, so the facts, but the story gave the facts their soul, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, you know, like, again, this book, I'm obsessed with it. So sorry, I get obsessed and then I like verbatim quote it. But like, Gallo identified like 5 different types of storytelling, and like, you know, those who can educate, ignite our inner fire, simplify, motivate, or launch a movement. And I feel like your talk had components of each of them, but like at the heart of it, it felt like a movement. It felt like, you know, we're trying to move or incite our inner fire to create a movement for a better, more progressive, more inclusive, more transformative mining sector.
Yeah.
And I guess, what was that the main goal of your talk, do you think?
Yeah, so at the time, this was such great advice, I give it out to other people that are doing speeches now when they pass them through me, is at the time I was working with a coach, and he said to me, what do you want the audience to come away feeling? And I want them to come away feeling inspired, right? That was the whole idea, is that they understand that mining is a very complicated, layered, tons of areas of gray. But ultimately, if we can work together, we can begin to build a mining sector that will probably still be very complicated, but will be better for it. Because as a consumer of goods, when you understand, like, knowledge is power, right? So how can you understand what is going well, what isn't going well, and use your knowledge to push us to account as a sector? Because we're not very good at policing ourselves. So we need really the public to do that for us, but we need to do it in a way that won't completely catalyze growth. And that comes with all of the knowledge that was in that TED Talk.
Yeah, and it is so complex to do that. Like, I just thought it was beautifully delivered. I was so interested to hear what like the thought process was behind that. And you mentioned obviously you wanted your audience to feel inspired, and I definitely feel like, you know, the most inspiring people are inspired. So what inspires you?
Oh, the reason, the whole why do you do what you do? Well, there's a lot. You know, there were things that have happened to me in this sector that aren't that good. I have a post ready for today, which is a parody on, you know, doing a job for a certain amount of time, having received excellent feedback, and then being told, oh, wait a second, we have to go out and interview. We have to take it external to the market. And I'm like, wait, I've been doing this for 6 months, and you haven't at any point told me that I'm not doing it well. So why would you do that? So things like that have happened. So there's definitely that. And I find that when I speak to many entrepreneurs, that there's a level of workplace trauma that they come from, where it is, I don't want to experience that again, so I'm going to work for myself. And I think that's really one of the reasons why, is that the more diverse we get as an industry, whether that's gender diversity or neurodiversity, and ethnic diversity, or in any ways those may intersect, that we become a better sector. Yeah. Right? So when I do prospecting, I'm emailing a lot of men, like almost all the time, especially in the junior sector, where you look at the management team and they're almost exclusively men. And and they're getting younger and younger. Like, sometimes I wonder about, like, how young are these CEOs going to get? Maybe I'm just getting older.
Yeah, but I couldn't agree more. But maybe it is just us getting older and being in denial.
Yeah, exactly. But like, it would be lovely to start to have a different set of leadership teams that I'm emailing. I think that's one of the things that drive me, is when can I see diversity on these leadership teams, especially within the junior sector.
Yeah, completely. And it's, how do we attract more diversity to the leadership? And I guess for me, like, you know, successful leaders as well motivate their teams by sharing their values and their stories and their vision, and then hopefully, like, you know, great cultures attract great people. So we need to kind of go inward to do that, to then attract more 100%. Of this talent. Yeah. So how do we do that, I guess? And you touched upon this again. I keep referring to your TED Talks, but it was powerful and a lot in that short amount of time. But how do we do that to change the leadership teams within the mining industry?
Yeah, we have to definitely cultivate a lot more introspection at the leadership level. So then there's so many different ways to skin that proverbial cat. The biggest one is you have to be introspective of yourself. And so I don't know, I hear me say that and I swear they all get itchy thinking I'm going to make people like journal their feelings, but I don't journal my feelings. So that's not necessarily the case, but it is a matter of saying, I responded to that in a way. Was that the right response?
Yeah.
Right? How did that person go away feeling? And it really has to start at that CEO level.
Yeah.
Of how did my, CTO feel or my VPX feel when I was screaming about something that was completely out of their control? Was that the right approach? They brought me a problem, and I maybe did not approach that the right way. And so you have to be willing to be introspective to that. Yeah. And you also have to be willing to be open to being talked to, so that when somebody comes to you and says, this is what's happened, there's no attack. There's a point to listen and learn and digest and say, okay, so, let's talk this problem through. Because there's that old adage, like, bring me solutions, not problems.
Yeah.
But that's like a perfect world scenario where that person has access to all of the information. Yeah. And they may not have access to all the information, so you can't expect them to have a solution if they don't have that, right?
Yeah, I agree. Like what you've just sort of discussed there, in my opinion, is like an empathetic leader.
Yes.
And somebody who's able to remove maybe ego and lead more from soul or self. And like, it's very difficult because we've almost been conditioned to lead from a state of ego. Like, I get it. And like a lot of the time to actually get to that place, there's got to be an element of ego. But it's the impact it then has downwards if we're not able to actively ask for feedback, take it from a place of grace, compassion. And I'm really excited about how we can maybe encourage that, because obviously a lot of emotional intelligence and empathy, it's deemed sometimes softer skills, and I kind of want to destigmatize that, because actually behind the most successful relationships is the ability to communicate and from a place of empathy. I think that is something that the industry, or every industry, really, really, really needs. And it's funny because some of the traits that you're discussing, obviously, I know that you are quite open about the fact that you're neurodivergent, as am I. I mean, first of all, before we talk about that and some of the superpowers that I think come along with being neurodivergent, how do you present from a neurodiversity perspective?
Yeah, so I have a few things that I have. Definitely executive dysfunction. So in the common vernacular, that would be procrastination or laziness, which I hate that. The other one is rejection sensitivity disorder. So when I was in big corporate firms, I was constantly feeling like I was going to be fired. So those are the two really major ones. I also will have almost like day disruption. So if something moves in my day, that might throw my whole day off. Yeah, like those are probably the biggest ones that I have. So
they're like our key challenges, and everybody's different, right? There's no everybody has a different experience of being neurodivergent, as you probably do being neurotypical. But I've worked really hard on the fact that once I've sort of realized that this is me, and everything starts to make so much sense.
Oh my gosh, yeah, the diagnosis is so key.
So key. And now I'm really going through a reframing exercise, and actually I'm like destigmatizing these, like just the word ADHD, obviously with inattentiveness, hyperactivity, it's all synonymous with like chaos really. But what about our superpowers, and first of all, what do you think they are? I mean, I've got an idea of what I think our superpowers are, but what do you think are our superpowers? Because they're abundant.
Oh, so I think one of the biggest ones is because typically we're better at spotting patterns that you can pull together the whole story piece of it, right? So I tend to work very badly in silos because as soon as I start to work across, I can see the big picture. Like I can understand, okay, so this is happening because of that. So you'll have like market pieces, you'll have all kinds of different things that you have to dissect. And so I always used to call myself like a puzzle box builder, where I take all of the pieces of the puzzle and I build the top of the box into the picture. And we need people that can do both, right? So it's that whole deep and narrow knowledge versus shallow and wide knowledge. And so I'm definitely shallow and wide, and that allows me to bring the deep and narrow together to build a more fulsome understanding of whatever type of problem we're trying to solve. So that's a big one. With tools, I can actually bust through my executive dysfunction very quickly, and I'm highly productive. Like I can do a significant amount of work in a very short amount of time, which is funny because people will always ask, like, how do you do so much? And I'm like, I template and use AI. Like it's so. Like it doesn't mean that I'm replacing my knowledge. No. Going back to that whole storytelling, you can't use AI to tell a story. But you can use it to start the stories, right? So, how do you get over that procrastination, writer's block, whatever you want to call it? So I think those are two of definitely my superpowers. So.
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't agree more. And I think, that ability to spot patterns, is integral in the success of being an innovator. And, yes. That's something that I think is a huge superpower. For me, it's creativity. That's kind of just our DNA, which goes hand in hand with what you've discussed. It's the resilience. For me, empathy is a big thing, like sometimes to my detriment, but at the same time, I think that it gives me the ability to connect with people as well. And at the heart of everything, it has to be from an emotional connection. When you're bombarded with like so much choice as whom to work with, you're going to want to work with someone who's more human, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And having that empathy, which we discussed, which is obviously, I think, a key trait in modern day leaders to build teams, and from a talent attraction and retention perspective. And we talked about it before, and I think this is maybe like at the core of like us wanting to be change agents and like, launching a movement, which is a type of storytelling, but it's that strong sense of injustice.
Yes.
Right?
Oh yeah. That's so key to
in a way, you know?
Yeah, that's definitely, is that a superpower? That's definitely one thing that I have is like the strongest sense of injustice. And that's very common in neurodivergence as well. So it's either I see injustice all over the place, which can make me really sad, or I'm, heads down working to solve injustice, which can be very sad or gratifying depending on how things are going. So, but that's definitely another key piece, which comes along with empathy, right? And your ability to connect with people, because then you understand their perspective.
It does. So my question to you is, what value could more neurodivergence in a leadership team offer in the mining industry, do you think?
Oh, I do think it's definitely, there's a few. I think that, there's so many. where to pick them, right? Because they're often more innovative as well due to the whole pattern spotting piece. I think what it ultimately is going to give you is an entirely different perspective on what you're experiencing. And we're going to bring all of those superpowers in. So whether that is pattern spotting or empathy or sense of social justice, all of those things are ultimately required for a very healthy project, right? So you need to have somebody that can deeply connect with the community around you in order to get that social license to operate. That will keep team members, because you're highly empathetic, because they want to stay with that leader ultimately, because you don't quit workplaces, you quit leaders, right? And so you do need these leaders to be extremely empathetic, very connected. And then once you get that ability in somebody, maybe a more generalized position like a COO, and working across the operations, or CEO, then you now have that ability to pull together all the picture and to really be able to dive down into where some of the challenges are based on other things that might be outside the periphery of other visions.
Love that. Love that. And like, you talk about obviously, the leaders that you've wanted to work for, but who's the best leader you've worked with or alongside?
Can I say Beth Barodi, even though I'm currently working with her? I think what Beth really understands is, and it could be because we work so closely together, like on a daily basis, is she can actually tell when I am in a bit more of one of my excitable moods, because that's one of the things. I get very excited very quickly, and when I do that, I charge like forward. I'm a bit of a bull in a china shop. And so she will read whatever it is that I'm doing and text me and say, I can see your frame of mind that you're in, and so this is how we need to address that. But at the same time,
honest, that's very candid, but you are very open for her to do that with you. She obviously provides a safe place to be able to deliver that feedback without, when we go back to obviously the, rejection sensitivity dysphoria as well, there's a danger that could be received negatively, but she clearly doesn't do that you receive it like that.
No, I think I have experienced that when I first started working with Beth. So I went from member to employee and group leader with her. Obviously, she's the ultimate group leader, but so in the beginning, maybe because I have like perfection requirements that I put on myself. But now, the feedback in that space is very safe, where I don't feel as though like I'm going to be fired constantly or anything like that. So, and I find that in general, the people that I want to work with the most are the same. So if it's a client that does provide the safe space, that does understand neurospiciness, even if they're not themselves, or they're compassionate, caring people, then I will ultimately thrive under that type of leadership.
Love.
So
I couldn't agree more, and I think that is exactly what we need to advocate, like providing that safe place where you feel seen and heard, and you will get the best of us, because when you do provide that, the creativity, the energy, it just flows. So I guess it's like an education piece to the leaders to recognize that not one size fits all, and actually we are rewired differently, but work with us and understand us, and you could get the results are just amazing what you can get.
from it. 100%. And it was funny because Beth recently sent me something and she said, don't read this because I don't want you to start solving the problem. I want you to focus on some other things. And I said, okay, that's good to know. And I needed to know that because that's what I would do. So she was like, you can read it, but don't start solving the problems. And I was like, okay. So in that parameter, which was given in a very compassionate, empathetic way, knowing my method of working, I immediately said, thank you very much for that parameter. I will read it, and I will save the problem solving for when we meet next.
Yes.
So
she's taken the time to understand you, and that goes such a long way, doesn't it?
Yeah,
and that's
100%.
As a result, you'll get the best out of Peggy and your workforce by doing that and taking the time. It's a bespoke approach to leadership for sure.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious as well, there's a lot of talk around the power of habits, James Clear with his book, and are there reoccurring habits or traits within the top high performers in the industry? So have you got any habits or non-negotiables or rituals?
So I'm really, really careful of how I spend my time. We talk a lot in Femina about boundary setting and are you too busy to take care of yourself? And when sometimes I might hear, oh, I can't do that because I'm too busy, I'm out of capacity. And because I'm like, I don't understand that, because I always have, from almost the very beginning, found ways to protect my energy and my capacity. So that's the biggest one, is that, and it's not necessarily a time thing. It's recognizing when I'm getting burned out and saying, I need to stop now and I need to figure that out. I do a practice called Yoga Nidra, which is it's a yogic sleep almost, and it's 20 minutes, almost like meditation. And so I do that almost daily. I do Yoga Nidra almost daily.
What time of day would you do that?
Typically I do it right after lunch.
Yeah.
So that's been instrumental to my mental health, and I do prioritize my mental health so all of that is wrapped into, I go to therapy once a month. I make sure I go to therapy once a month. I work with a naturopath to ensure my nutrition is doing well.
Yeah. You're hitting your pillars. You're hitting the key pillars that you need to thrive.
Yeah. I could probably work some movement into that a bit more. That's the next step in this whole crazy journey called life. But the prioritization of mental health, especially in the last 4 years, has definitely been a game changer.
For sure. And I think we have like Gen Z to thank for that.
Oh my gosh.
For, like, you know, safety in numbers, like it's a collective, it's a movement, it's pushing boundaries. It's something that we've not prioritized to our detriment. And I'm very grateful that this generation have made this something that is a hot topic, and we're starting to see it become, I don't know whether it's box ticking, but the right organizations are seeing this as a priority for sure. And I feel like, again, it's something that is obviously very prevalent in my industry in the search space, but, you know, talent acquisition, and we know, don't we, that like, you know, in Australia, it's 64% down with regards to the graduates entering the industry as well. So talent attraction is a huge thing in an industry which is probably still synonymous with being a little bit behind with that. So how can we attract more of that sort of youthful, innovative, fresh talent into the industry to create a brighter future that we're trying to discuss here, one around leadership of like empathy and more compassion?
I think that there's really two things that we could do. The first one is we need to change like the generational curse of people just don't want to work anymore. Like it seems to be like almost with every generation, like boomers and Gen X, but I have heard leaders say in casual situations, well, Gen X doesn't want to work, or not Gen X, excuse me, Gen Z. And I say, no, that's not the case. They just have a very clear definition of what the employment contract looks like.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's not like me where you could continuously pile on work and I would just keep on saying, yes, of course, I'm going to do this.
Well, we have no boundaries as millennials.
Yeah, right. I'm just supposed to be thankful to have a job. That's what my parents keep on telling me.
Right.
Like they have a much more fluid understanding of that. So you can't continuously put work on them because they'll say, no, I don't have the capacity. Yeah. And they mean it. Like they're like, no, or you can pay me more, because this is what my contract states. So for them, it's a true contract. It's not a giving your life over to an organization. And so that's one way, and I commend them for that. I think the other way also is I've been really digging into reverse mentorship.
Okay, tell me.
So instead of, because we always do this whole, we need to be mentoring young people to become the next leaders. And yes, that's true. I also think, given a couple of recent conversations, that is a potential to groom young leaders into ways that we're perpetuating a lot of the pieces that we struggle with, which we don't want to be doing. So we need to be very more cognizant and selective about who we're mentoring our young people of. Right. But also that we do it in a reciprocal relationship where we are learning what is so important to Gen Z that they don't want to compromise, and we take that as a learning ourselves, and we begin to interact in the workplace more like a Gen Z, where we do say, no, I don't have capacity, where all of these other pieces, or I do want to go spend time with my kids, and we make that appropriate for both women and men. Because Gen Z wants to spend time with their family and their friends. We need to recognize that, right? So I think that there's learnings that we can do from both sides. And if that mentoring becomes more reciprocal as opposed to trying to groom people into leadership roles, then we'll have a more successful organization.
Definitely. It brings more of a collaborative feel. It's more two-way. It's more, obviously I feel like it's blending in some coaching sort of principles, because obviously mentorship is more of a directive, whereas actually at the core of it, obviously there's a baseline. If you don't know anything, you've got to go in as entry level. There's always going to be more directive, but then it moves more into a coaching. You have all the resources within you. It's unlocking that potential, but also learning from the generations below. We are not the finished article. We should always be advocating that growth mindset. And if we're not staying, open to new ideas, we're very quickly going to turn into dinosaurs ourselves. And that's the worry.
Yeah,
but yeah, the constant war for talent is huge within the mining sector, and the gap is widening as more and more people are retiring. And it is interesting. I'm being selective who comes on this pod with regards to their sort of leadership philosophy as well, because I'm so passionate about how the right leadership can have an impact beyond the employees and the organization, but especially in the mining industry when we're working in, developing countries where actually that has an impact on the society and the community. So
100%.
Yeah, I'm all for this new way of leading. It really is.
Yep.
So, I mean, I feel like you may have answered this question, but with Beth, who actually, we haven't actually given some context to the listeners who Beth is and the Femina Collective. So before we do that, do you want to just give an overview of Femina? Because in itself, this is an exciting movement.
Yeah, 100%. So Femina Collective is a membership-based organization, and our goal is to radically change the experiences of women in natural resources. And so that can be really in any way that you interact with natural resources, be it finance, investment, legal, operations, leadership, ownership, and investment, very two important places that we're starting to focus on. And I work with Beth as her Chief Growth Officer. So I joke because I'm on the Make Beth Famous train, which is actually going to... It's in motion, yeah. So I'm the one that is, maybe not on her personal stuff, but I'm the one that is behind a lot of her conferences and podcasts and all of these other things to really elevate how we can change mining by supporting women. So
amazing. And what is the essence of Femina then? Like what, I think you've started like a new female-only investment collective within the mining industry, when in itself is quite innovative, right?
Yeah, so we're definitely looking at ways that we can educate and get more women involved with investment, because I say that in the past, once a man reaches a certain income level, you would probably have another man, or you might be, taking it way back, you might even be sitting in some leather-bound club somewhere, and the guy would say to the other guy, hey, did you know you could become an investor? Like, you've now reached that point. And that's never been necessarily a woman's experience. Nobody's necessarily taken them by the hand and say, this is an accredited investor. You have now reached that point. Yeah. What do you want to do with your money? Yeah, so that's one way that we're looking at it for sure. But other ways is that it's really about, we don't necessarily advocate the way some other organizations do, because we invest in the woman, right? So we are looking at what is the wellness, how do we support the wellness of women in this in this sector. We have an entrepreneurship arm, which is really about education, and so we had an accountant come in, and a big piece of that conversation was, how do you know that you can afford to pay yourself as an entrepreneur? We'll talk. Yeah, it's much more of a deeper personal connection. It's not a networking space. It's without sounding hokey, it's very much,
isn't it? It's practical takeaways and building blocks on how to become an entrepreneur, a female entrepreneur in quite a male-dominated industry.
Yeah, and we're not just for entrepreneurs. We also have women from some of the major mining houses, but it's very much about supporting yourself so you can be a better leader.
Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
So my question was going to be, who or what is your North Star? And I feel like you've kind of answered who is the most inspiring leader, but how would you answer that question, I guess?
I think, so I think my North Star is ultimately these women that are doing really amazing things, be it inside a company or outside a company on their own as an entrepreneur. These are women that deserve to be celebrated, to be recognized, to be acknowledged, and to be heard in the same way that we hear a lot of the men in the sector. They have as much knowledge, if not more, and when they speak, we should stop and listen to them. And I lump my kids into that too, both my daughter and my son, because they're going to be entering the workforce, and I want them to be kind, empathetic people. And my daughter is 14, and she has the strongest brain of, like, she knows no, and she will stick to that, and she will we were talking about football games and people making out under the bleachers, and she's like, ew, that's gross, I don't want to do that. I want to just play rugby and be active and do stuff like that. And my son is a historian in and of himself, and so same thing, is learning all the stories of the world. And so I want them to be able to feel safe and comfortable, really, ultimately. So
it's almost like we're reparenting our inner child, aren't we? By being,
oh my gosh, I'm so reparenting my inner child.
Yeah, and all those times where I didn't feel like I could self-advocate or use my voice, my God, is my daughter making up for that. Yeah. And to the point where I am literally just in awe of that, and long may that live, because these are the future generations, and making it more inclusive and equality is very, very close to our hearts.
Yeah,
that's wonderful. Amazing. So what impact are you seeing from this, if any? Is it taking some momentum? Have you seen some positive changes from the movement so far and the incentives?
Oh yeah, definitely. There's I think where I see it, which is the most important, is definitely within our membership. We have a couple members that would say, I never had the bravery to say no to roles that I know the company doesn't align with my own personal values, but I would have taken it because you need the money, whatever, you need to be working. And so for them, it was very much I had a bravery to say no. And it was because of Femina that I recognized that company wasn't aligning with my values, and I could say no to that, which was that alone is really amazing for me.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, 100%. And then also just the connections. We've been able to help members build out all-female panels on conferences, get board positions. So it's like the ripples, right? So how do those ripples go out and continue to make waves? So, and that's the most exciting piece for me, is these ripples. So.
Ripples, amazing. And if people listening want to become part of the Femina Collective membership, how would they do that?
Yeah, so they can go to our website, which is thefeminacollective.com.
Yeah.
Or they can follow us on LinkedIn. We have a very active LinkedIn process or page, and so that is the Femina Collective. Today, which I don't know when this is airing, but today is October 24th, and we're having our Q3 call. Those are open to anybody on LinkedIn to attend.
Okay.
But we also have The Changing Face of Mining, which is my own podcast, which we'll have to have you on at some point. Yeah. And it's even scarier because it's live all the time.
It's scarier.
But we have that too. So I moved my show over there this year, and the response has been amazing, and we get all kinds of people coming on doing fun things. So
amazing. Well, I can't wait to see it continue to gather momentum and have an impact. It's much needed. Honestly, I am so in awe of what you guys are doing, and I can't wait to follow and be more involved.
Thank you.
So I like to lead this discussion with something that other people can take away. So the future generation of leaders in the mining industry, what advice would you give them?
So I typically give two pieces of advice. One is if you're really, really early stages, is take education in whatever interests you, because mining will always have a place for you. And I've had kids quiz me. I had one kid say, I want to be a personal trainer. And I was like, oh, I have no idea how that fits in. And then I said, wait a second, drillers have to be really strong. So we will find a place for you.
A PT on the mines in Cote d'Ivoire. Come on.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Well, health and safety, you got to have strong bodies to protect your bodies,
Yeah.
right? The other one that I often give is for people to stick to their values. Right? So understand what your values are, stick to those, don't compromise. As long as you can do that, you'll be okay. So that takes so much bravery, but if you can really internalize that piece, you'll have a ton of respect, and people will take care of you.
I love that. And I think just before we wrap this up, I think the most important thing with that is actually defining what your values are. Spend the time thinking about what they are, like, stem from your belief system. And before we do leave, then what would you say your values are?
Ooh. Because I feel as though I have strayed from my values in the past, definitely. There is, I think it's
and
just
can be fluid, right? Like values can change according to the stage of your life or where you are.
I think a big one for me is integrity and being kind to everyone. I have found myself in a place before where, due to the number of positions we could see as women within the organization, we were not kind to each other at all. And so, that's kind of where I've strayed, is really building those political alliances that were not okay. And part of my own healing and growth within the industry is now I'm getting to the point where, making amends and going back and apologizing and recognizing what I did was wrong. And
that takes so much strength.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like healing for you, right, as well.
It is, yeah. It is. And so what I need to be accepting of is that apology may not be accepted by the person I'm giving it to, and that's okay. It's going to probably hurt, but I'm not. But I am, they are deserving of the apology, and I am deserving in whatever way that takes.
And that goes back to your awareness, which is so important. I just say Peggy Leadership School. Let's roll it out across the industry. Empathy, self-awareness, going back and making amends, healing, having a voice. I love it. Well, listen, one of your values is being kind. You've been so kind to afford me this time. Come on, share your insights. I absolutely loved it. Oh. Thank you so much.
Oh, so much. My pleasure. I thank you so much for having me.
It's been a pleasure, and I no doubt will see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.